Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is a Public Works podcast. My name is Joseph Blackman, and today I got a real treat for you. His name is Kevin Johnson, and he is the Department of Public Works Director of Macomb Township in Macomb Township in the beautiful state of Michigan. Kevin, say what's up to everybody.
Good afternoon, everyone. How you doing this afternoon?
Good stuff, Kevin. So, what's a township? Explain us. It's new. I know towns. I know cities. I know. What's a township?
Great question. But a township actually is so starting with a city. A city it basically comes down to ownership of infrastructure. I guess from my perspective, it's ownership of infrastructure. Nearby cities like Sterling Heights or Troy, they may have ownership of the roads, maybe sidewalks, storm infrastructure, whereas a township, not as structured in that regard. So there's things that the township is not responsible for. The county actually oversees it. So the county takes care of our roads, snow plowing, maintenance. Storm sewer is private, not ours. Sidewalks, we have a program to maintain sidewalks, but like the cost is the burden of the resident, and we take on liability. So there's different things legality wise that kind of, from my perspective, makes the difference between the township and the city from a public works perspective.
Gotcha. We'll get into that. But I know you Michiganders, you guys use a hand to describe where you're at in the state. So where are you guys at?
Yeah, we are right by the right where your thumb meets your palm, right in that area. So that's roughly where we're at.
Good stuff. So it sounds like there's differences, cities, townships, and counties, and all that.
Yep.
I want to know what Kevin's day looks like. Give me a rundown from when you get to the office until when you leave the office. What's Kevin doing?
Yeah, depending on the day. Typically, I get in a little bit early. I try to get in before everyone else if I can. But I have two supervisors that are normally in before me. They're the ones that are creating the work orders and getting the plan together for the team for the day. They're overseeing our sanitary sewer lift stations, our PRVs, which is where our connection is to Great Lakes Water Authority, who we receive our water from, making sure everything's good for the day. I talk with them, make sure everything's good, what's on the docket. Then I'll come in, check my emails. I do have I'm a spreadsheet junkie. I live by spreadsheets. So I have a daily task, I have a monthly task, annual task, project task. So I go through my gamut of what things I have to accomplish each day or week, or what's on the docket for the week. And then obviously go through emails and such and catch up on that. Typically once a week, depending on the day, I'll have a meeting with all the management of our department to kind of see what's going on. So in my township, I oversee water and sewer department as well as facility and grounds. So I monitor the maintenance of the buildings as well. So I meet with all of them to kind of go over a game plan, where everyone's at, what we need to deal with, what's going on, good, bad, ugly, and really just kind of share information, because it's all about communication, making sure I'm communicating with my team. And then from there, it's just kind of going through projects that I have lots of meetings. Great Lakes Water Authority is where most of Southeast Michigan gets their water from. So there's a lot of meetings that pertain to them. Or there's meetings on other projects we have going on that we're replacing water main or sanitary sewer, or even we're replacing some roofs over at our town hall and DPW. So a lot of bids, proposals, all that kind of stuff going on. On occasion, I'll go out in the field, check on the team, see how they're doing once in a while. But ultimately, it's just kind of managing projects and making sure that, we're staying within budget and managing the money wisely.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I like lists also. So what merits like making the list? Because there's some things you're like, oh, I can remember that, or I can get that done in 10 seconds versus something you have to write down and kind of plan to get done. So how do you delineate what makes a list or not?
So the list, so what I do is, every year we might have capital planning or budget like most communities do. So that'll fall on the annual list. I might have my daily list where I have emails from residents because we might be dealing with a sidewalk or a storm sewer complaint, or a resident has an issue with their water. But most of the time the team will handle that. Sometimes they come to me, so I typically write it. I don't write because I can't read my writing, so I use Excel to like make my notes. So I'll call this person back. I leave dates and times of when I left messages. So anytime I get in communication, that's what I end up doing. Most of the time it's through email, but the list is all dependent on, it's mainly projects or main topics I need to talk with the team about to make sure we're getting stuff accomplished, because there's so much going on that people don't realize how much works behind the scenes to make everything function. Not just my department, just municipalities in general. There's everyone has different ways to keep it in order, and my keeping the chaos as minimal as possible is a spreadsheet for me.
Gotcha. At the end of the month, how can you look back and go, oof, that was a good month? Like, you hit all your meetings, you're on time with things. Like, what's considered a win for you month to month, in regards to your list and productivity?
Yep. So a win for me is making sure the team is being successful in what they want to accomplish. Every year, I put together, when we go through our budget, I ask our management staff or the whole team in general, what are your, kind of like a wish list. What do you want? And just throw it out there. Nothing is too dumb to see what makes sense, because everyone has ideas of what would be successful in the field. I felt growing up when I started in this industry, I felt like it was the old school way of like, just do what you're told, and they listen to a point. And so I felt like when I became a leader, I wanted to make sure I listened to the team, because they're the one doing the work. They're the ones doing all of the work. It's not me. So I'm not going to take any credit for that. So they do the work. So what do you need to be effective? And so if they need a certain tool, if they need, whatever it may be, I'll try to find a way to make them successful by buying them something that they need, management, whatever, and making sure that when the budget comes due, they're out there and say, go buy your stuff. They're happy because they're getting things accomplished. Them being happy makes us more successful, and that makes me happy because our team is being successful overall. So my overall goal is making sure that they're successful, and that makes me that's a good month, good week, good year.
Totally. Good stuff. Good stuff. So I like to dig into the origin story of Kevin Johnson. Yep. I know you didn't wake up, one day and you're a leader, you're Department of Public Works Director. Give us your career trajectory from when you graduated high school all the way up until today.
Yeah. So I first started working at Target right during high school. I worked there for 3 years. I had a friend I worked with in the back stock room. Him and I were really good friends, and we did really good work together. And he ended up leaving for a municipal job. And at the time, I was getting frustrated with my job. I wanted to move on, do something different, because I felt like the Target wasn't taking me seriously. And so I had the option of, there was a position at Home Depot that would open up that'd be similar, or I could go the Township route, which I had no experience. So I was like, well, I trusted him. So I jumped into facilities and grounds, weed whipping, marking ball fields, all that kind of stuff. And I jumped into it not knowing where it was going to take me. I did college for 2 years out of high school, but just because everybody did it, it wasn't for me at the time. So I stopped going. Probably one of the hardest things I ever had to tell my parents. But I stopped going to college. And I'm like, well, I got a career path. I see a potential future here. So I was in facilities and grounds for roughly 2 years. And the municipality I was in, the progression was to go from facilities to water and sewer. If you wanted to make more, that was the natural progression of the department. So I was like, okay. So I was like, the way I like to approach it is, what do I got to do? So figure out who's doing that, ask them what they do, and then go do what they're doing to make sure I can be successful. So I got my S license, I got my CDL, so I could drive a air brake truck. And then over time, I ended up getting into the water department. I was a utility worker for 14 years, doing a lot of underground work, sewers, lifting pumps out of lift stations, all that fun stuff, plowing snow. And then eventually got into management. I was able to get promoted to assistant director, did that for about 7 years. And then I ended up moving over to Macomb Township because they had an opening for director. And I was able to. They trusted me enough to take the position, so I took it, and here we are. So it's been a great journey. That was my goal from, I don't want to say day one. I would say once I got to the water department, that was my goal, was what I got to do to become the director. And every choice I made moving forward was in, towards that goal.
Interesting. I'd like to dive deeper into that.
Absolutely.
Because I a lot of operators listen to this, and I'm sure they kind of want to follow your path of, starting at parks or starting at, facilities and maintenance, like you said, lining fields all the way up to director. What were those choices or forks in the road that you intentionally said, hey, I want to do this instead of that will put you in position to be that assistant director and now director level?
Well, I think so to move from facilities over to water, for me, it was, mowing lawns can be relaxing and great, but this wasn't for me. I didn't enjoy. The biggest thing was I would drive the big machines and just get beat up, because over time the ground isn't always soft as you think it is, and I just got tired of getting beat up all the time. And also I wanted to be more, a little challenged a little bit more, and not in a facilities way. I watered, for some reason, water and sewer just gravitated towards it a little more. But when I got over to that department, one of the things I focused on was, what is like one of the scariest things you could think of doing, and like just tackle it. It's not always the easiest thing to want to jump in. You want to kind of sit back and kind of watch a little bit. And the crew leaders there did do that. They're respectful. They weren't like you're brand new jumping and you're fixing something major. If it was dangerous, they say pull back, let the experienced guys do this, because they don't want to get, you're learning. You don't want to get in harm's way. But any chance I got to do something uncomfortable, I would do it. And not uncomfortable as in unsafe, but uncomfortable as in something that I felt was going to be outside of my knowledge scope, or they were going to make fun of me because I didn't know what I was doing. But I had a great team that supported each other. Yeah, there was some ribbing going on, but they supported each other, and they helped me along the way and taught me, because I listened. I'm listening. I'm doing. I'm not complaining. I'm not arguing. If I was in an unsafe condition, I would complain. But I was just making sure I'm just trying. You got to do. I learn by doing, not just watching. So that's the big thing.
Gotcha. And how could one, because I've been on plenty of different crew yards, and you see the dynamics of the different types of people on the yard. How can one turn themselves into, like you said, learning, asking questions, just being a sponge and learning from the person who's done it before, instead of that attitude of I know everything, I can figure it out on my own, like that lone wolf attitude? How can one have that mindset switch?
Yeah, I think it's really just it's not only understanding, if you might know something, but it's understanding how that team works. So I've hired people from other communities that come in. I've had some that don't work out because they come in saying, I know all this stuff, don't worry, but you might know it, but you're not doing it in the same way that this team works. So you're kind of rubbing it the wrong way a little bit. So it's not only doing it, but it's also being able to work together to make it work. I have people who, they know their stuff, but they listen, they're quiet, but they ask good questions. It's never a bad thing to ask a question, never a dumb question. Always ask questions of the experienced individuals, because that's the whole point of everything, is learn from them, because that knowledge is going away. So get it while you can, and just really understand the nature of the team and how it functions, and be able to work together, to make sure we can all be successful and go home at the end of the day.
Yeah. Totally. Let's say you're mentoring a youngster and they say, Kevin, what would be the one skill set that they should pick up to be successful at what you currently do today? What would that skill set be?
I would say there's a couple things. Number one, I would just say, don't take things personally. It's if you don't know something, don't make it seem like it's a knock against you. You can't know everything. I got my S license at the beginning, like most people do. You can read a book all day long. There's book smart, and then there's the field smart. Just because you know the book doesn't mean you know how to fix the stuff in the field. So you still have to understand it and respect the people who have done this for a long time. I think also it's just the nature of working smarter and not harder. Sometimes the challenge can be when newer people come in, there's new technology you can use to make the job easier. But a lot of times the team that's been around a while like to do it the old school way. And there's nothing wrong with that, but sometimes it's a little more labor intensive. And so the younger team gets picked on for being, softer because they got to use, you got to use a machine versus breaking it by hand. I lived through all that too. But it's understanding, don't take it personal. That's just how they grew up and how they worked. So it's just a different dynamic of how to be effective as a team and to be successful overall.
Yeah. Yeah. What are you seeing? One of my main focuses is that aging workforce. A lot of people focus on the aging infrastructure. All the pipes are old underground and this and that, and they're ready to bust. But I always talk about the aging, workforce. Those guys who been on the yard for 30 years and they're about to leave in the next, 6 to 8 months, 2 years from now, and they're going to take all the institutionalized knowledge. What have you seen? It could be within your township or surrounding places that has worked in bringing in and retaining that new young talent.
Well, really what it comes down to is making sure that, well, number one, it's really hard to find talent right now. It's really hard to find. I'm sure as you've talked to a lot of people, there's not many people in this industry who enjoy it or want to do it or even just think about it. So number one, it's hard to find them. But in terms of retaining them, it's really making sure that management respects how they operate, how they work. I come from a standpoint of, if something is going wrong with my team, I look at myself first. What am I doing wrong? Am I providing the right tools, the right support for them? Or I expect my management to do the same thing. Before we accuse them of doing something incorrectly, did you provide them the proper tools or the proper time or whatever it is to make sure they could be successful? If not, let's look at us and fix that. If it is them, then okay, how do we make them understand to be more efficient in what they're doing and how they can do it? But ultimately, I think it comes down to the management team being respectful of everybody involved and how they operate. Nobody can be trained the same way. You can't teach or you can't talk to everybody the same way. A lot of times, they think it's not fair because this person's not being treated the same way as me, but they're motivated differently. So I can't treat them the same way. If this person wants to be motivated by getting pushed, that might look like I'm berating them, let's say. No, they like to be pushed a little bit or be held a little more accountable in a different way. And so sometimes it looks different. That's just, you make it look like with the way everything works, you always assume that everyone's gonna be treated the same way from when you're in that position. But once you get to management, you realize you can't do that. Everyone's different. I work differently than my assistant. Him and I work really well together. We operate differently, but we both get our jobs done. We do it differently, right? I can't treat him the same way as I would my admin staff because, they're not the same personalities.
Yeah. I mean, you should definitely get paid more for also being a psychologist. Because you're like juggling like hard things, or meaning like, tactical, tangible items like pipes and ropes, sewer and facilities. And then the soft skills side of thing, the psychological side, like, hey, okay, this is Billy. He likes to be motivated this way. How can I motivate him this way without scaring everybody else off? Trying to navigate that. All right, we need a story from Kevin. A story of when something went wrong under your watch, what you did to fix it, and then what lessons you learned from it to apply to your future career.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what came to mind for me wasn't necessarily like an infrastructure project, but it's more of a team aspect. And coming into the management role, I'm a procedure guy. I like procedures, how they, writing them down so everybody knows how everything works. Like you said, retaining the knowledge of what happens. It's also processes, why we do things a certain way. And when I first became an assistant director in I think it was 2015, one of the things I would always come across, which many people do, is I'll ask somebody, why are you doing this that way? And they'll say, that's the way it's always been, which is, everybody always took that as, when I asked a question, they would come in, they'd almost make it, they would feel that I am critiquing how they're working, like they're not doing a good job or they're not doing something correctly. And so it took me a few years, but I would just explain to them, I'm just understanding why you want to do that. And that's actually my favorite answer to hear, because that means we can look into it, delve into it, and see if we can change it. Because people are used to just doing something a certain way, maybe it's not the most efficient way. And so I really got the team at the time to really adjust their train of thought, and just not just doing it because that's the way it's been done, but they can actually open their mind to say, okay, I can think about this and I can do it my way efficiently, versus, a lot of times when I was a utility worker, it was just do what you're told, do this. I would have some room to get it done, but it was just get it done, where I want to give the team the freedom to think about it, like put it in your mind, how would you do this? Because not only am I trying to make sure you're doing the job correctly, maybe you might want to be management one day and you'll understand the critical thinking process. So in your management, you can understand all that and why I'm trying to put that in your brain to be like, think about those things. Because a lot of times you're not given an opportunity to do that.
And also, I take more ownership when I'm just giving the pieces to the puzzle and have to put it together myself, versus when they say, okay, here's the pieces, here's how you're supposed to do it, here's how long it should take, and I learn more when I do it on my own, versus like having the exact, the old way we always do it done. So
yeah. So I don't know if I just say it went wrong, but the challenging part was it was really tough to change that mindset, because everyone's just so set in their ways of doing something a certain way, and to try to change that can be very challenging. So it was a fun challenge. I enjoyed trying to change the mindset. I'm a very positive person. I'm a happy person. I want to bring joy and excitement to the job every day. And so that's how when I bring, so hopefully when I'm asking these questions, people aren't thinking I'm, being negative. I'm just trying to understand.
Yeah. Okay. So how does Kevin skill up? What's your personal and professional development regimen like? How do you keep getting better and better year after year?
So there's a few things I do. I get a lot of magazines, the typical magazines for the industry. I try to, I don't read every article. I find articles in the magazines that pertain to my industry that might make sense for my township or my region. I'm very much, one of the things that excites me a lot, and I have passion for, is capital planning and regional collaboration. So I like regional collaboration a lot. And so when I look for things in there, it's like, okay, how could this not only help me, but how could it help potentially the region as a whole, not just myself? Because ultimately, in the long run, this is all infrastructure we all got to work together. It's not going to work individually. We got to be successful together long term. So I do a lot of the magazine reading. I like doing self-improvement books. There's the author, Simon Sinek. He's a good author. He's a lot of YouTube videos, but a couple of good books about finding your why and know your why, to really understand from a personal perspective, why are you doing what you do, not only in work, but just in life. And then also creating the why for your team. Why is your department, why are you doing what you do every day as a team? So it's really, it's a good exercise to really look at yourself to see why you're doing what you're doing, and not just, well, I'm just here to put pipe in the ground. And also attending conferences. I attended my first American Waterworks Association conference, the Michigan section one, this past month. And while not all of the speakers maybe were something that would have brought value to me specifically, a lot of the networking was big. I spoke with some people and networked to eventually got to talk to you. That's how I met you, is through going there, talking with people, and through that process, I got to this point. I think it was Hillary Caron. I think you did a podcast with her. So I talked with her a bit, and I'm going to be helping. I want to do a thing with her and her education thing, and that led me to this. So it's kind of cool how the networking can really, not only the speeches you listen to or the presentations, but it's all this, because you're trying to get the word out for our industry, and how we can really attract people and explain to them how exciting it is and how important it is that we what we do.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And I would agree too. Like the hallway conversations at those conferences sometimes can trump the actual keynote speaker. That you get more out of those hallway conversations.
Yeah.
One thing I wanted to ask you about was a regional collaboration. I think that's huge because, I mean, you might be doing something completely different than somebody in Florida, Texas, California, because you have your own little part of the world. Looks different, smells different, feels different, sounds different. What is there something set up that you and your I guess counterparts can get together and talk about what problems you're seeing, what anecdotes you're finding, or is it something that you intentionally reach out to the next township over and say, hey, how are you solving for X?
It's kind of a combination of all of that. So one thing I did is I'm what's called a co-chair for the Great Lakes Water Authority on behalf of Macomb County. So I represent the 11 Macomb County communities that are part of the Great Lakes Water Authority. When we have meetings, I'll talk with them on what would be helpful for them that I can bring to the table, things that could be occurring in our region that could be helpful. Anytime if we have an issue, like I got their contact information, and so I have an email group. So if there's an issue if it's SCADA, update it to SCADA, or if it's how are you guys doing your, we had to do our service line verification stuff, or how are you guys operating your pools. I could reach out to these people and say, hey, how are you doing this? And then I can get a response back through all of us. And if worst comes to worst, we all can meet up for a meeting and talk about it. So I even with my team, I have different levels. Like my supervisor who oversees our SCADA, I'm like, reach out to other communities, get to know them, have meetings with them, have lunch with them, because you guys can help each other in the long run. The whole goal is if they need help, they know you're right there to help too, and vice versa. They can help us, but we don't know that because we don't get to know each other. So I really like reaching out to other communities and how they're doing things. They reach out to us, and it just solidifies relationships at all levels that we can be successful together.
Yeah. No, I like that. And that's one thing I like about the public side, agency side, is that you guys aren't competitors. There's no reason why you would hold information near and dear, and not share with the next town over, because it helps everybody out.
All of our goal is, as water and sewer, even the facilities, like the goal is you almost want people to not know you're there because their water and sewer are supposed to function. So the goal is to make sure the resident has a positive experience while living in our community. And that's true for all. So if a community nearby needs help, I tell my team, go help them, because that person that has a problem might be moving here one day. So, or vice versa. Let's just help each other out, because in the long run, it just makes for a successful environment for all of us, which just makes us all look good.
Sure. What would you say is the biggest misconception about your position and your role within the community? Like, what do people normally get wrong when they hear your position or your title?
I think there's two things I think of. Number one is every community is different on what a Department of Public Works director oversees. Like I oversee facilities and water and sewer. Another community might oversee engineering and building too. Every one is different in how they're set up, so not one is the same. So it can be very easily confusing on what a public works director oversees.
I'm learning that, yeah.
Yeah. Number two, I would say just the amount of work that goes on behind the scenes to get things accomplished. I'm working. The team in Macomb Township is amazing. But it's working with engineering, and you're working with building, and you're working with the board, township board. We're all working together to put pipe in the ground and to make this stuff. You're talking millions of dollars that you got to throw out there, and it's not an easy task. We have residents who, and obviously elevations and communities are all different. So we have a northwest corner that has lower pressure because it's a higher elevation, and everyone's like, well, turn the pressure up. But we can't, because gravity pushes it all to the south. So all it's going to do is just the people in the south of the township are going to have more pressure, and you're not going to have anything because it all just goes south. So it's going to take us like 2 years or so to get a plan, come to a solution, and then prepare plan, design it, and then engineer it, and then build it. So it's it just sounds easy to turn pressure up. It's a lot of work and a lot of effort between engineers and us and you name it to make those things happen. And so I almost wish people could see that sometimes and how much work it takes, but it is what it is. It's okay. The goal is to be, honest, tell the residents what we're doing. We tell them all the time, we're working on it. This is what we're doing. This is how it's going, and move forward. But that's a big one.
Yeah. And you've been an operator before, so you like you said, you're striping fields and out in the streets with the yellow vests on. So you to be able to answer this question, let's say a city constituent wanted to thank one of the operators out there. What would be the most impactful pat on the back from a city constituent for an operator out there in the field right now?
To thank someone, the most I would say the most important way would be to almost say it either to email us. Calling is great. We get calls a lot, which I'm thankful for, but could you send me an email? Because that way it's written down, take a name so that it can go in their file and we can let the board, because what happens is I get the email, I let, HR know, and they let the supervisor or the board know, and then they can get accolades for being a good steward for the residents. Right? That's the whole point. So even calling board members and saying they're doing a great job, absolutely reach out to the board members. Or I do that anyway because I feel like recognition is a big deal. So if someone's doing a good job, they should be recognized for it. So, but I would say an email or something that's documented goes a long way, because that way it's not like I'm just calling and saying, "Hey, doing a good job." There's really somebody, someone it's out there. So.
Okay. All right. Let's say you're commissioned to put up a billboard, and this billboard is in the most trafficked area of Macomb Township. What ask of your community in regards to water, sewer, facilities, grounds would you ask of the community and put on this billboard?
Yeah, this is a great question. I listened to a few of your podcasts, a lot of your podcast shows to try to get ideas, because there are some good ones out there. But the one I kind of had before.
No flushable wipes.
What's that? Oh yeah,
no flushable wipes.
Exactly. Mine is more. It's more generic. But it's basically like investing in today for a brighter tomorrow. And that phrase can go a long way, basically, because the challenge we face is nothing gets cheaper. Everything gets more expensive. So the cheapest you're ever going to replace it is right now. So a lot of times, many communities have the struggle of trying to get board members to want to do all these capital projects, which cost money, which means you have to potentially increase your water rates to make that happen. And it's not always a positive thing for board members to raise it, because they want to make sure that their goal is to keep costs low. So we have the bad, I don't want to say it's a battle, because the community here has been great. They're very receptive and understanding of what's going on in our community. So I'm fortunate that I don't have much of a battle here, but it can be very challenging to raise enough rates to be able to fund what you need to fund for everything to operate the way it needs to. So I would just say, I always say my job is to tell my board what they need to hear, what they want to hear, because they vote the way they need to vote. They're at the end of the day, they're the ones who choose to run the township the way they choose. But I'm here to tell them this is what you should do, and they can choose to do it or not, right? So, but ultimately, I would just say, if we can try to get things fixed now, that's the best, because it's just going to get. The more we procrastinate, the worse it's going to get. And we can already kind of see how far behind we're getting with all the funding we need to be able to do this infrastructure. We're already so far behind. It's only going to get worse.
Yep, that is true. That's true.
Yeah.
All right. I always like to leave a space on the show for you to thank mentors you had along your journey. And then also I want you to give a word of inspiration and motivation to your fellow public works director counterparts across the country.
Okay. So there's a lot of people who have impacted my life and my career. So there's a lot to thank, but I picked two that were really kind of pivotal in getting me to where I am today. The first one would be, her name is Jill Carmack. She was one of the first bosses I ever had at Target, and she really taught me work ethic. like I'm a hard worker. I'm always a hard worker, but she really taught me to understand the importance of going above and beyond and what you're doing, and not just saying my job is this. I don't go beyond this. It's not in my job description. She's like, if you can do more, do more. You'll be rewarded for it in the long run. So I couldn't thank her enough for helping me build my work ethic at like 16 years old to really help me get to where I am today. And then Don Coddington would be the other one. He was the superintendent of the water department in my previous community, and he gave me the ability as the assistant to take on certain things that he didn't have to. There was agenda items. I was like, hey, can I do the agenda? Can I go on the agenda and speak to the board? And he's like, absolutely, go ahead. So he allowed me to like take that role on, which is, again, like I said, take on scary things because it helps build that muscle. So he let me do that for like 7 years, and I couldn't be more thankful for him allowing me the freedom to learn and understand, while still understanding he was the boss. Ultimately, everything was his decision because it's his license and everything on the line. But I couldn't be more thankful for him as well. Word of motivation and inspiration. I would say two things. Number one, don't ever be afraid to ask questions. Anybody you talk to, it's always good to ask. There's never a dumb question, because you always hear it, but you never realize that there's so many people who want to ask the question that you want to ask, just everyone's too afraid to do it.
Yeah.
I was the same way. I was always shy and quiet until I started asking questions, and people were like, oh, thank you for asking it. I was thinking the same thing. And so it's amazing how much that really happens. The next one, this one really gets me a lot and I love it, but it basically says, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. And I love that because it is extremely uncomfortable to be in a room where everyone is smarter than you. It is not because you think you don't deserve to be there, you don't belong, and it's really uncomfortable. But by doing that, you learn so much from people who are, I've learned from people who are way smarter than me, and it's amazing how much you can garner and learn from them. So I take that one to heart like every day. I try to find the smartest room, and I try to jump into it and gain as much knowledge as I can. That's helped me a lot as well.
Okay. Good stuff. All right. Let's say I'm coming to town. I'm coming to Macomb Township in Michigan, and I text you ahead of time. I say, hey, Kevin, where can I go to get the best burger in Macomb Township? Where can I go? Where are you going to send me?
All right. Well, for a burger, the burger I like is at a place called Bubba's 33. They have a really good burger. I'm more of a Mexican or Italian in my opinion, but we have good Mexican restaurants here. So there's a place called El Charro's, really great Mexican food, and Don Cristo's is another great place. They both have great burritos. So if people like Mexican food, I would recommend those two for Mexican.
Okay. Good stuff. Well, Kevin, thank you for hopping on the show. Thank you for sharing your wealth of information and knowledge. Any final words before we get out of here?
No, I did one thing. I appreciate you having me on. I really appreciate it, and I'm just hoping to really, get the word out about our industry. And I thank you for doing that as well, and hoping we can build a positive, atmosphere for it, so people really want to be interested and try to get into our industry and to get more recruiting for it. So thank you very much for your part too.
For sure. Well, Kevin, once again, thanks for hopping on. To all the listeners out there, share this with somebody who you think needs to hear it. This has been another episode of the Public Works Podcast, and thank you for tuning in.